Not all stories are just stories. Some are real nightmares waiting to unfold. Do you dare to listen? Subscribe to Scare Squad and step into the darkness. Turn on notifications because the next tale might just be your own. I've always been a fan of budget-friendly travel, which is why I frequently book Airbnbs instead of hotels. Most of the time, it's been a great experience. Clean places, friendly hosts, no issues. But last summer, I stayed at an Airbnb that changed everything. It was a last-minute booking. I was in a small town for work and needed a place for 3 nights. Hotels were fully booked due to some local festival, so I found a decently priced Airbnb, an old Victorian house owned by a woman named Margaret. The listing described it as cozy, historic, and full of charm. It had great reviews, except for one that mentioned something about strange noises at night, but I brushed it off. I arrived late in the evening. Margaret was an older woman, friendly but reserved. She gave me a quick tour of the house, pointing out the kitchen, bathroom, and my room upstairs. The house had that distinct old wood smell, and the furniture looked like it hadn't changed in decades. I asked if I'd be the only guest, and she nodded. "There used to be another guest room," she said, almost absently. "But I don't rent it out anymore." She didn't explain why, and I didn't press. I was exhausted. I settled into my room, a quaint little space with a 4-poster bed and a heavy wooden dresser. The only odd thing was the door. It didn't have a lock. I made a mental note to ask about it in the morning, but decided not to worry. I woke up around 2 a.m. to a noise, a whisper. At first, I thought it was coming from outside, but as I fully woke up, I realized it was inside the house. It was faint, like someone murmuring just beyond my door. I sat up, heart pounding, and strained to hear. Please let me out." I froze. The whisper was coming from somewhere down the hall. I reached for my phone, turned on the flashlight, and crept toward the door. As soon as I opened it, the whisper stopped. The hallway was dark and silent. My breath felt too loud in my chest. I debated knocking on Margaret's door, but didn't want to sound paranoid. Maybe I imagined it. I locked my bedroom door with a chair under the handle and forced myself back to sleep. The next day, Margaret acted normal, cheerful, even. She made me coffee and asked about my plans. I casually asked about the other guest room, but she just smiled. "Oh, that room has history. Keep it closed." Again, I didn't press. That night, I went to bed early, but around 1:30 a.m., I heard something new, footsteps. Slow, deliberate, pacing. They were coming from the hallway, stopping right outside my door. I held my breath, clutching my phone, ready to call for help. The steps didn't move away. They just stopped. I built up the courage to check. When I opened the door, the hallway was empty. But then I saw it. The door to the closed guest room was slightly open. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. I swear it had been shut before. Swallowing hard, I crept toward it and peeked inside. It was dark, but my phone flashlight illuminated the space. The room was mostly empty except for an old iron bed frame, a rocking chair, and a mirror. Dust covered everything, like it hadn't been touched in years. But the rocking chair, it was moving, not violently, not creaking, but swaying ever so slightly, as if someone had just been sitting there. I bolted back to my room, locked the door with the chair again, and barely slept. The next morning, I confronted Margaret. "I heard noises last night," I said. From the closed room, her expression didn't change. She simply sighed. "You heard her, didn't you?" I felt my stomach drop. Her? Margaret finally told me the story. Years ago, she had rented that room to a long-term guest, a woman named Evelyn. One day, Evelyn just disappeared. She left all her belongings behind, and no one ever found her. The police investigated, but there were no leads. After a while, Margaret locked the room and stopped renting it. "But she never really left," Margaret whispered. "She still thinks she's locked inside." That was it. I packed my bags immediately. As I was leaving, I glanced up at the house one last time, and I saw something in the window of the closed guest room. Pale face, staring down at me, I nearly tripped getting into my car and sped away, not daring to look back. I left a review warning future guests, but Airbnb removed it after a few days. The listing is still up, still 5 stars. I wonder how many other guests have heard Evelyn whispering in the dark, and how many never checked out. I've used Airbnb dozens of times. I love the convenience, the affordability, and the variety of places you can stay. But after what happened last month, I don't think I'll ever use it again. It started when my wife, Claire, and I decided to take a weekend trip to a small, quiet town in Pennsylvania. We both needed a break, a chance to escape the stress of work and city life. The place we found on Airbnb was perfect, a charming 2-story house in a secluded area, just outside the town. The pictures showed a cozy living room with a fireplace, a fully stocked kitchen, and a beautiful bedroom with antique furniture. It looked like something straight out of a fairy tale. The host, someone named David L., had great reviews, polite, responsive, and accommodating. We booked it for 3 nights. We arrived late in the evening, just as the sun was setting. The drive up to the house was eerie. Thick trees lined the winding road, and there were no streetlights. The nearest house was at least a mile away. When we pulled up, something felt off. The house looked exactly like the pictures, but there was an odd stillness to it. No lights were on, and the place seemed abandoned. I checked my phone for instructions from David, but there was no signal. Claire nudged me. "Are you sure this is the right place?" she asked. I double-checked the address. It was correct. The key was supposed to be in a lockbox near the door, but when I reached for it, I found it hanging open, empty. That's when Claire noticed the door was slightly ajar. We hesitated, but with no signal and nowhere else to go, we decided to step inside. The air inside was thick with dust, as if no one had lived there for years. A cold draft swept through the house, despite the summer heat outside. I flicked the light switch. Nothing. The power was out. Claire squeezed my arm. "I don't like this," she whispered. Neither did I. The furniture was there, just like in the pictures, but it was covered in dust. The once cozy couch had stains that weren't visible in the listing photos. The fireplace was filled with old, charred wood, untouched for what looked like years. Then I saw something that made my stomach drop. On the dining table was an old, faded newspaper. The date? August 17th, 1987. I picked it up, my hands shaking. The headline read, "Family found dead in Airbnb house. No signs of forced entry." The photo beneath it was of the house we were standing in. Claire gasped, "What the hell is this?" Before I could respond, we heard a noise upstairs. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. My heart pounded as I grabbed Claire's hand and pulled her toward the front door. We needed to get out. Now. But the door, the same one we had left open, was shut. And when I tried to turn the knob, it wouldn't budge. Claire was breathing heavily, eyes darting around the room. "There's someone up there," she whispered. Then the footsteps stopped, and a voice, low and raspy, came from the top of the stairs. "You shouldn't be here." I turned my head slowly, just enough to glimpse a shadowy figure standing at the top of the staircase. The light from the dying sunset barely illuminated him, but I could see enough, tall, unmoving, watching us. And then he took a step forward. That was enough for me. I grabbed Claire, yanked her toward the back door, and prayed it would open. It did. We ran to the car, not daring to look back. I fumbled with the keys, started the engine, and peeled out of there. The whole drive back into town was a blur. I was shaking, Claire was crying, and neither of us spoke until we reached a gas station. I finally got a signal. I pulled up the Airbnb app, ready to call the host and demand an explanation. But when I searched for the listing, it wasn't there. Not just unavailable, completely gone. No history of our booking, no messages from David L. Nothing. We checked into a hotel that night, too afraid to go back. I barely slept, replaying everything in my mind. The dust, the old newspaper, the locked doors, the figure at the top of the stairs. The next morning, I called Airbnb's customer support. I gave them the address, but after several minutes on hold, the agent came back with something that sent chills down my spine. "Sir, that property isn't on our platform. In fact, there's no record of an Airbnb listing in that area at all." I hung up. Later that day, I did some digging. What I found still haunts me. In 1987, a family renting that house for a weekend was found dead. No forced entry, no signs of struggle, just dead. The house had been abandoned ever since. And yet, we had booked it. We had stayed there, and something or someone had been expecting us. I've always been a fan of Airbnb. I travel a lot for work, and hotels feel too sterile, too impersonal. Staying in someone's home, even if just for a few nights, makes the trip feel more comfortable, more human. That's what I thought, at least before what happened in Colorado. It was a last-minute business trip. My company booked me an Airbnb just outside Denver. A quiet, modern home nestled in the foothills, surrounded by tall pines. The pictures made it look cozy, and the reviews were solid, except for a couple of vague mentions about strange noises at night. But every old house creaks, so I didn't think much of it. I landed late. By the time I picked up my rental car and navigated the winding, dimly lit roads to the house, it was nearly 11 p.m. The host, a man named Daniel, had left the key under the doormat, just as promised. From the moment I stepped inside, something felt off. It wasn't anything obvious. The house was clean, the furniture modern, and everything smelled fresh, like recently laundered linens. But I felt like I was intruding. The air was thick, the kind of stillness that makes you hold your breath just to listen. I shook off the nerves. It was late, I was exhausted, and my mind was probably just playing tricks on me. I locked the door, double-checked the windows, and set my suitcase down in the master bedroom. The king-sized bed was neatly made, a set of fluffy towels stacked at the foot. I was just about to get undressed when I noticed something strange. The closet door was open. Not wide open, just a crack, but enough to notice. I didn't remember opening it. I assumed the cleaners must have left it that way, but something about it unsettled me. Maybe it was the way the darkness inside the closet seemed deeper than the rest of the room. I walked over and pulled it shut. It didn't latch. I tried again, pushing harder. Still, it wouldn't stay closed. Kept creaking back open just a sliver. I sighed, too tired to care, and climbed into bed. I fell asleep fast. I woke up suddenly. First, I didn't know why. The room was pitch black, the only sound my own breath. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Soft, deliberate. Somewhere in the house. I held my breath, my mind racing. Maybe Daniel had come by for some reason. Maybe it was a mistake, a break-in. I reached for my phone, heart pounding, but before I could check the security app, the footsteps stopped. I sat up, listening. Nothing. Just silence. Maybe I'd imagined it. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I finally started to drift back to sleep when I heard it. A whisper, right by my ear. I shot up, my body rigid. The room was empty, but I could still feel the breath on my skin. Cold. Wrong. The closet door was open again. This time, wider. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and shined it inside. Nothing. Just empty hangers swaying slightly, as if disturbed. I slammed the door shut, grabbed my bag, and moved to the living room, heart racing. I didn't care if I was being paranoid. I wasn't sleeping in that room. I was on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, forcing myself to stay awake. Every small noise made me jump. Then, the motion sensor light outside flicked on. Someone was at the window. I turned my head, expecting to see an animal or a tree branch moving in the wind. But instead, I saw a face. A pale, hollow-eyed face pressed against the glass. I scrambled back, grabbing my phone, but the second I blinked, the figure was gone. Just gone. I checked the front door, still locked. Every window was latched shut. No footprints outside. I was done. I booked a hotel and grabbed my bag, ready to leave. But as I was rushing out, something caught my eye. A framed photo on the hallway wall. It was a picture of Daniel, the Airbnb host. but next to him stood a woman. And she was the face I had just seen at the window. I drove straight to a hotel, leaving the key in the lockbox without a second glance. The next morning, I messaged Daniel. Hey, weird question, but who's the woman in the photo in the hallway? He didn't reply for hours. Then finally, Daniel, what photo? I described it to him, the frame, the hallway, the woman beside him. His response was almost immediate. Daniel, that's not possible. My wife passed away 5 years ago. That picture isn't there. I didn't reply. Instead, I checked the Airbnb listing, scrolled through the reviews. Most were normal, but buried deep, I found one from months ago. It read, "Great house, but at night, I kept seeing a woman in the hallway." I thought it was just my imagination, but when I mentioned it to the host, he stopped responding. I don't think he wants to admit it. But someone else is still in that house. I never left a review. I never looked back.